Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And joining me today is the host of 3 Minute Board Games. You know him, Jarrod J. Carmichael. Welcome back to the show, man.
Kia ora koutou, everyone.
This is great because you're a returning guest to the show, and it was wonderful talking to you. God, it was a few years ago now, pre-COVID, which sounds like a different era. And now,
I did not listen back and see what we talked about. Did we just talk about the channel, or did we talk about Red Dust back then? Or
Red Dust wasn't even a thing, baby. It wasn't even a thing. You were just some guy, and I was some other guy, and we were just talking about some board games and some recording stuff. But now you're a published game designer. You are a veritable institution on the board game space. I would say you are a voice of reason and advocacy in the social media space of board games. You're a leader in that. One thing I've always admired about you is your willingness to kind of calls it like you sees it. And the reason why you're here is you're also an author. I got your book.
Yep.
It's in my hands right here. 101 Board Games to Try Before You Die of Boredom.
I did not pick the name, by the way.
You didn't pick the name.
I stand behind the concept, but not necessarily the title. I tell you what, putting out the book, Jesus, doing a game is so different because I play games, I review games, and I know what makes a game good, I think. And when my games came out, I'm like, I played and tested these to death. Putting out a book, like, I have no idea. It could be absolute rubbish.
Yeah, well, it's not rubbish. It's interesting, and there were moments in reading the book, which I did read and enjoyed, and even my wife then read through the book, where I did have some thoughts about, like, this is interesting. Would I have tackled it this way? Ultimately, I haven't tackled any writing, so, like, your league's beyond me. But we'll get into that in just a second. But I'm interested to know, you cover so many board games. What are you playing for fun these days? Like, what's getting you really amped up and excited? The type of gaming that you might chronicle 10 years from now as highlights of your gaming career.
See, this one's really straightforward. So, about 2 or 3 years ago, I was getting pretty bad burnout with doing reviews, because you're doing like 1 to 2 reviews a week. You're learning 1 or 2 new games. You're basically churning through them because you want to get 3 or 4 plays in for each game. You need multiple groups doing that, and a lot of solo plays as well. And you just like churn. And you find a game that you think, like, this is so cool, but I also know in a week's time, I might not get back to this game for a couple of years because I have to dive into the next one. So I rescheduled my week so that I have like Friday nights and every second Sunday for old games that I want to replay or keep playing. And Friday night has almost exclusively for 2 years now been one game and one game only that I've played every single Friday that I can, and if I can't play it, then we play something else, and that's Arkham Horror, the card game.
Wow, now that is a great game and a lot of content to wrestle with, and it kind of sounds like something that we did over here. We had an ongoing game night for Gloomhaven and then Frosthaven. We've gone through all of base game, the Jaws of the Lion, and then ultimately Frosthaven, and we just reached the conclusion of Frosthaven, and now we're like, well, I guess we can play a couple missions as sleeping gods or something. Where there's a void. Yeah. What Arkham Horror LCG campaign are you currently playing?
So currently I'm playing by myself solo. I'm doing a Dream Eaters run through, so it'll be my 3rd Dream Eaters run through. And with the group on Fridays, we're on the finale of Edge of the Earth. So what I tend to do is play them through live with my Friday group the first time. Like, absolutely experience it with people the first time. And then I play it through on Tabletop Simulator multiple times by myself. And then I put out a review. So I think we've done 7 campaigns now. Like, 7 campaigns through. So Pretty much done everything published aside from Drowned City and Forgotten Age now. So I've just been hammering it.
Man, God, there's so much content. There's so much good stuff in that. Like, how much attention do you pay to like constructing your decks and really getting meticulous about that constructed aspect? Because I grew up playing Magic and other TCGs, and I like Arkham a lot. But one of the barriers that I've always found is, like I just don't have it in me with Arkham to really fine tune a deck. And I think that's because I'm wrestling this sort of approachability of having other people who are not the TCG background players joining in, and I don't just want to make something for them and be like, trust me, this is going to be bananas.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like I'm letting myself down if I'm playing precons.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I don't really use my phone to browse or do anything. And when I get my phone stats report every week, most used app, Arkham cards. Every single week. When other people are browsing through social media or whatever, I'm just like, flick, sort, flick. I've got like a dozen designs on the go at any given time, which is why I run them through Tabletop Sims. And then when I'm playing in the group, I tend to turn up with the most janky, ridiculous, okay, guys, I've got a plan. I think this might work, but it might be really terrible deck. I'm currently running an Edge of the Earth, a Preston Millionaire deck, and it revolves around the Red Glove Man and storing bonus actions and then getting as many Red Glove Man actions as you possibly can. So one turn, you do nothing aside from store your actions, and then you bring out the Red Glove Man and do everything. It's like this weird burst deck, and it works so well when it's working. And it's so much fun watching the other players at the table going, what are you even doing? Throwing cards down.
Where do you, as an experienced Arkhamer, fall in the perspective of Barkham horror? Like, it is now a legendary item that is no longer available, and you see all the time on like subreddits and that kind of thing where people are like, oh my god, like Barkham horror is $200, I want to get my hands on Barkham horror. And then you have experienced players who are like, it's not worth it. It's barely even a joke.
Yeah. I passed on it when it came out. I don't really get it.
Yeah.
It's not that funny, and it's certainly not what $300 funny, which is what it seems to be going for these days. Like, nah. I mean, I had missed out on the Return to Night of the Zealot and Return to Dunwich horror boxes. I'd kind of like those mostly for the player cards and Return to Dunwich. But, it is what it is. Like, I'll proxy those cards if I have to.
Right.
I'm not going to pay, again, $200 to get 20 cards I might use 6 of.
I would...
Bandolier 2 is good. It's not that good.
I would love nothing more than just like a 3-hour tour of your Arkham collection, process, organization, management, deck constructing, just you vibing with Arkham horror. That would be like my dream video from you. So, you can put that in the background.
I'm already planning on doing a bucket load of Arkham content once I've played, because I've still got to do Forgotten Age, and we've still got to do Drowned City. But that's it of the main campaign. So once I'm through those, and then I've played them through a couple of times on Tabletop Sim, I'm going to do like the big, here are my investigators, here are my top scenarios. Oh, geez, I've got to play through all the standalones, because I've only done half of those as well. So there's still quite a bit to do.
I'm definitely going to watch that. That's so awesome. So let's talk about
such a good game.
Let's talk about you becoming an author. So, like, what was the impetus of this? How did it begin?
Hilariously, you'll probably know this, but when you've got a YouTube channel like mine, you get requests for the strangest things every day. Like, you'll get, hey, we represent Nike, we want to do advertising. And you're like, I'm pretty sure you're not doing that from an .op.pl email, so spam. You get so many of those. And then one came in about doing a book. They're like, hey, we've looked at your "Hi, my name's Elliot. I've looked at your. I'm an editor at Page Street Publishing. We've looked at your YouTube channel, and we make these sort of books for hobbies and stuff, and we would like to talk to you because we think that your way of summing up games would make you a good fit for writing up a book that has a lot of games in it." Mm-hmm. And I just stared at the email. I stared at the address, and I leaned over to Steph and I go, "Steph, this doesn't look like spam. This looks real." And I had to stare at it for like 10 minutes, and she was like, "No, that looks real." It's like, do we reply? And yeah, so I replied. It was they just cold approached me, and I actually just went from there. And they basically showed me examples of other books they do. Like they had one with someone reviewed a whole bunch of horror short stories, and they also do ones with different arts and crafts, like a crochet book, a cooking book, all that kind of stuff. So it was like, let's do a cooking book, kind of, but for board games.
So that actually answers one of my questions, or I guess one of my quandaries on kind of the tone of this book and what it's intended to accomplish. How much freedom and flexibility did you have in the structure and presentation of the game, of the book?
Absolutely, almost unlimited. So
okay, that's awesome.
They were like, "We don't know board games. That's why we're reaching out to you.
Right.
We absolutely trust you to pick the games that would fit." We got into a normal conversation because I was like, I want to do stuff that isn't just the usual, "Hey, this is Scrabble, this is Monopoly, this is
right.
chess. Ooh, if you really want to push yourself, you could try some serious games like this new game, Catan." I'm like,
right.
Catan's like 30-something years old now. It's like 30 or 40? 90.
95, so 30 years old.
Yeah. It's not a new game. We should... For some reason that we talk about it, it's like, oh, it's this fresh new thing you can get in the hobby. It's pretty old.
Right.
So I wanted to look at games that were a bit more contemporary than that. Cover ground that hadn't necessarily been done in other board game books. Because I had a quick look around and I was like, yeah, that one's talking about Monopoly and Scrabble. That one's talking about Carcassonne. Cool, let's do something a bit more contemporary and a bit more modern. So the oldest game in the book is Ticket to Ride. That's 2004. So and that nearly didn't make it
in. You had to make a lot of cuts. Like 101 games, there are a lot of people who would, like shiver in fear at having to narrow their own collection down to 101 games. Selecting 101 possible games that someone who theoretically doesn't know this hobby very well would be recommended as possible things that they can move to. That's a daunting task. Like, where did you start with this? Did you just go like, all right, well, here's a list of 500 games and let's pare this down from here?
A little bit. So I kind of went through every game in my collection that I'd played. So I've recorded most of the games I've played on BGG and just sort of created shortlists and then started paring them down from there. One thing, though, with the criteria in this book is because I wanted games that were both awesome to play and looked awesome, several of my all-time favorite games did not make the cut. So Terraforming Mars is a game that I will play non-stop all the damn time and have played hundreds of games of it. It's not in the book because it's ugly.
It is disco Thanksgiving. Art. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so budget, and they could just do a little bit more with that game and make it so much nicer. Like the Ares Expedition art is just 100 times better than the original Terraforming Mars. But look, I don't really like Ares Expedition's gameplay, so that's why those games didn't make it in. Even though Terraforming Mars has never been in the 7 years I've done the top 100 on my channel, it's never been lower than 5th. So, yeah, there was a very specific component of the games having to almost be works of art as well as good games. So that immediately cut out a whole bunch of games. Food Chain Magnate. That's kicked to one side.
Right.
Yeah. Agricola. There it goes.
Well, I mean, there's a certain charm, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Castles and Burgundy's only in there because of the new version.
Because of the new deluxe version. Yeah. I actually had to explain to a friend just the other day, who he's relatively new to board games, and he got the bug hard. Like, he's in that stage of acquisition where I'm like, bro, you can settle down. Take it from me, you do not need to own every game that someone else says is good, and also, you don't have to own every game that you think is good. Eventually, you're going to play so many games that you're like, these are so great, but you have nowhere to place them. You know, you're having to export them, and when you live in Juneau, Alaska, finding places to get those games to becomes a pretty enormous endeavor. But I was explaining to him what a beige euro was, you know, and he was like, what do you mean beige euro? And I was like, oh, it's like my favorite genre of game. He's like, he loves euros. And he wasn't quite understanding when I was saying, like, well, particularly back in the day, let's say the Castles of Burgundy day, or, you know, anywhere between Carcassonne to, you know, maybe like 2012, there was a certain brand of Mediterranean trading where it was just beige and, you know, like dull. You know, it really was, how do we put the least emphasis on the visual appeal and just have spreadsheets that barely represent some sort of thematic concept.
And your player colors were brown or tan or wood.
Yeah. So one of the things
one of my best new games to me from last year was Hearts of Teutonica.
Oh yeah,
which is almost a definition of a grey beige euro.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's a great game.
It's such a great game, but it doesn't have the sex appeal.
No, it doesn't. But when you're playing it, you're just like, this is a rage engine. It's so good.
Mm-hmm. But you have to think of these games as ambassadors, because, again, theoretically, the person that this book is for is not me, right? You know, like, I know these games, and at first I was like, well, Jay, he is a very thoughtful dude, and he's going to come in here and he's going to write individual entries on, this is why this game is important. Like that's almost the direction that I was going to, you know, like you were writing your thesis on board games, and what I was confronted with when I actually read it, which I think is much more functional, though I become less of the audience for, is here's why you, as someone who has not played this game, might like this game. And
absolutely,
that is such a cool thing to be able to hand someone who's only played Catan or Ticket to Ride, or maybe they, you know, went to an office game night or something and someone brought Lords of Waterdeep or something, and you're like, hey, you kind of liked those things. Here, this is a great way to start without having to dip your toes into BoardGameGeek.com.
That's exactly it. So I also went very much for, this is what the game will make you feel, and this is the sort of the wow moments of the games, rather than going, this is how you scored the victory points, you know. Because you don't need to write a book like that for the people of Board Game Geek. They've got the top 100. There's already a 100 list on Board Game Geek of the top games as defined by that self-selecting group. That exists. That is ground well traveled.
Right.
So again, didn't want to do this is Scrabble, this is Monopoly, and check out this new game Catan, but I also didn't want to just do, here's the top 100 on Board Game Geek. Right, because Board Game Geek might as well put that book out.
So nuts and bolts then, I was looking at some of the things like, say, complexity. Did you utilize Board Game Geek for measuring complexity, or did you decide on your own metrics there?
So I use the Board Game Geek as a basis, and then kind of shifted them one star up and down depending on gut feel.
Right.
Because sometimes some Euro games end up being like a 4.5, but if you compare them to a war game that's also rated a 4.5, they're nowhere near as complex.
So what occurred to me while I was playing is it exposed certain things on Board Game Geek that I fundamentally disagreed with, that I did go to Board Game Geek to be like, wait, did BGG actually rate it this way? The one that first came to mind was Cascadia versus Parks. And you have Cascadia, Parks, and Harmonies all in here. And I was reading through the section, because each of the sections here are based off of maybe not just weight, but, the type of gaming that you might be doing. And in the first section, vibe. Quick and fun games. I was like, okay, Parks is in here at a weight 2, playing time 30 to 45 minutes. Interesting. I kind of think of Parks as a little bit more meaty. It's got some worker placement, but, and then I get through to the next section, which is just a notch up, family-friendly games. I see Cascadia in here at 60 to 120 minutes with the same level of complexity. And personally, I know there are some diehard Cascadia fans, but personally, I was like, this is just, there's just not enough game here for me. And the idea of Cascadia being in a level of dimension that is somehow above Parks outraged me at first. I was like, Jay, what are you doing? And then I was like, BGG must have these completely the complexity aligns on BGG, and that made me start thinking about how just like subjective these like star rating systems are for complexity, for best player count, how much of this is user generated. Nonetheless, like I'm not saying that these are inappropriately placed in the book, but I wonder if while you were organizing this yourself, if there were some categories where you were like, I guess I never really thought of this game as this, and putting it into this zone. But if I use these metrics that you're aligning yourself for, at least using as a reference, that it made more sense to have it in one section versus the other.
I mean, you've actually stumbled on a small thing here, and that was that originally Parks was in the same chapter.
Oh.
And I moved forward one because I was like, oh, geez, this chapter's only got like 7 games in it. Which one of the games from the next chapter can I move forward? That's it. That's sometimes there's little compromises you make, like, okay, which game can probably fit in quick and fun from this block? And like, probably Parks.
So when you're writing the individual sections for this, about how much time would it take you to write a blurb on one of these games as opposed to writing one of your 3-minute game scripts?
It takes much longer to write one of these than it does a script.
Really?
Because the script is actually pretty straightforward, because my process for doing a board game review is I shoot the photos first. Mm-hmm. So I set up the game and I go, okay, do an intro shot, do that. What are the win conditions? Shoot, 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 shoot. What are the core mechanics? Shoot those. Okay, let's go through a turn and we do all the sequence. So when I'm writing a script, I literally bring up the pictures and go, right, and the next one, I've already got it, because I've written the script in my head while I was taking the photos.
That's so smart.
And then, well, that's just my process. It's just how it's always
been. And it's such a smart process. Do the photos. It's way better than trying to write like witty banter, which obviously is not as well. Either I'm not witty enough, or it's just not as valuable as like, what is this game? Like you drive to the essence, which is, I think, speaks to the popularity of the channel. And
then once you've been basically spent 2 to 3 hours doing photos, and then say 35 minutes, 40 minutes doing the nuts and bolts part of the script, well, you've just spent 4 hours thinking about that game, so you launch straight into doing what are the pros and cons. Your brain's already been cogitating how you're going to phrase those things, and they just kind of flow. Like, in many ways, I spend more time writing the last line, which is the witty gag, than I do writing the rest of the script. Sometimes I'll quite frequently get to that point, shut it, and then go away and do something else, and then try for something to pop up.
Was there any part of writing this book where you were worried about it being dated? Like, that's one of the things when I see these types of books, and I've seen them my entire life. Like, I grew up playing a lot of video games. I've been part of so many different hobbies, music. These are the top 100, bands you have to listen to. And then the moment that book becomes 2 years old, it's missed so much potential. And especially because you're cutting on the edge of modernity here. Like, you have arcs in here, which I was very surprised. I was like, damn, hot off the presses. You have arcs in this book.
So, arcs was literally the 101st game added.
That's perfect. That makes sense.
Because I'd originally written a chapter on Twilight Imperium, 4th edition, that had been in the book, but I struggled to find a copy of Twilight Imperium to photograph. So I own 95 of the 101 games, and I borrowed the other 6. Well, yes, yeah. But the person I tried arranging to do Twilight Imperium with kind of essentially ended up ghosting me. So I was like, well, I've got to get these photos in a week's time. I don't have a copy of Twilight Imperium. I'm not going to go out and buy one because it's like 400 New Zealand dollars.
Yeah.
And by happenstance, that night we were doing the test for arcs for the channel, so to review it.
Yeah.
And we played it through the first time, and I was like, holy shit, this game has to go in. This has solved my problem. Because it is just doing things that I find way more interesting and modern and exciting and contemporary than poor old busted ass Twilight Imperium. That is just
your space cats and turtles got moved to the side. Move over, Granddad.
Yeah, and it's almost like that game was getting in because of its reputation. It was one of those games that I personally haven't enjoyed playing a huge amount the last couple of times I've played it.
Right.
But I was like, you can't really do a book on big, impressive games without talking about it. And then Arcs turned up, and I'm like, nah, get out of here. You're gone. You're fired. You're out of the building.
Right. Well, back to the original question.
Arcs was great.
Were you worried, or are you worried about this being a dated resource within a couple of years because you're going to miss on potential recommendations?
Not really, because any book's an item of its time. Most of the games in there will exist in some form or the other. Even going back to I've been knocking on the whole Scrabble Monopoly thing.
Right.
Games are good.
Yeah.
Like, these games will probably still be good 20 years from now. They just might be pretty hard to find. Someone called me out on that. They're like, "Oh, that game's out of print." I'm like, games are always out of print.
Right.
Like, there's going to be some games in there that you'll have to find secondhand. That's just how it is, because this market's constantly going up and down, up and down. You can only pretty much set your clock that a handful of games like your Catans, Dominions, and that are going to be in print the whole time. Arkham Horror, the card game, it looks like they're going to stop printing some of that stuff. So
that's a travesty. Like, even as someone who only owns so much Arkham Horror, the card game, and again, I'm a dabbler compared to the hardcore nutcases like you, which I say in the most honorific way.
No offense taken.
But when I heard that news, it was like, I'm shedding a tear for the people who, like, there are a lot of people where Arkham Horror is their hobby. It's not like board gaming is their hobby and Arkham Horror is just like another game on the shelf. Like me, there are people where that is a sizable chunk of the joy that they get. But thankfully, there's a lot of it out there still available.
Yeah. So, as far as I'm aware, yeah, it's going to be a stake in time. Like 2 weeks after I finalised the book, Endeavour Deep Sea came in, and that became my game of the year. It's also a game designed by two of my friends, because Jarrod and Carl are from New Zealand. Jarrod I've known since my 20s.
Wow.
And Carl I met about 10 years later. And they designed this amazing game, and it just missed the cutoff. And so, yeah, that's a great example of how it is literally something like August 2024.
Right.
It's a timestamp.
Yeah. Well, I guess that leaves the opportunity. Like, if this were a travel guide, then you would have the opportunity for, like, second edition, right? You know?
Yeah.
If it sells well, then you could be like 101 board games to try before you die, 2026 edition or something like that.
Yeah.
You got to get that money. You got to get that money. You got to monetize, man.
Could drop out a handful of games and put in some new ones. Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
like, I was just talking on my Discord, and there's like, if I did 101 more games, there's been 12 I've played this last 6 months that would go in. There's been some real good games that I've legitimately played and gone, these things were good enough to pop into the book.
How much did you think about variety of publishers, variety of designers, and even I guess the personality of the designers themselves? Because there are some games out there where, you know, like, the people who made them, we found out some real bad stuff about, and then you're like, oh man, this is a pretty good PAX game, but geez, did he really need to put that in the, you know, like, manual?
I sort of, there's a bit of self-selection there. I think Fantasy Flight Games have more games than anyone else. By a considerable margin, but that's because from about 2005 through to 2020 they put out way more good games than anyone else. Like, they're absolutely amazing. Aside from that, I don't think any publisher has more than 3 games, and the 2 publishers with 3 games are Stonemaier Games, which I think have Viticulture, Scythe, and Wingspan. And I don't think there's many people would go, boo, those 3 games don't deserve to be in there. Like, come on. And then the other publisher with 3 games is probably a slightly surprising one. It's Level 99, because they've got Millennium Blades,
which I thought was
the consortium.
I thought Millennium Blades was an interesting pick. When I got to that page, I was like, oh, okay, we're not just going with the most marketable game to a mass audience. We're going with some niche stuff. I like this. But it's so cool. It's such a unique, interesting, and fascinating game. Argent is another one, and Imperial Spells and Steam, which is just a train game on crack cocaine. It is something unique and interesting and fascinating, and it looks stunning, and it's got great gameplay, and it's just so weird. Because Level 99's games are all weird. I didn't feel so bad putting 3 of them in, because it's not like I've put in Gaia Project and Terra Mystica. Right, yeah. Though you do talk about different editions of games or different versions of games, like in the Century Golem edition, which I also thought was funny, because the beige Euro guy and myself, I was like, I like Spice Road. That's the one in my shelf. He's taking digs at my Spice Road.
Death to Spice Road, Golems Forever. Like, come on, the little gems. Like, Steph in particular, she just loves the little gems. She's like, plays with them while we're playing. So,
were there any notable snubs to you where you were like, people are going to hate me for this, but this game cannot be in here? From
Terraforming Mars.
Mars, yeah.
Like, that's one of the big ones, because that is literally a game I love to death.
Yeah. And also, people know you love it. You know, like, if you were doing your own personal top 100, people know it's in there, and they know to expect it.
Top 5, yep. But that got snubbed just because it ugly. And I mean, the Firaxises, the people who behind it, the game aren't particularly great either.
No,
they're very conservative.
They're
unpleasant sort of people, and they're really into AI imagery as well.
right.
So,
That was a big controversy recently, and another thing that I was going to ask about. I didn't see a disclaimer on it anywhere in the book, but I didn't know if the discussion. Well, I guess August 2024, the discussion was happening, but you as a content creator have flat out said you will not be covering any new games that use AI generative illustrations now, right?
Absolutely not. And that is one of the reasons why I picked the theme for this book. Why I went for board games as a combination of mechanics and artistry.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm really legitimately worried about the shovelware slop that is going to be
right.
just pouring onto shelves all over the world with this AI-generated imagery that's just garbage and awful and takes money from creators. It's a wholesale plagiarism machine, and I want nothing to do with it. So
right.
That's why there's so much art. That's why a game like Above and Below is in there for Ryan Lockett, because Ryan Lockett is such a beautiful artist.
Right.
It's why I went for that theme. Why Museum is in there. Because Vincent Dutra's art is for Museum is just next tier. It was deliberately put out that way as a antidote or a counter to the rise of AI imagery and board gaming. And I won't ever call it art because it has nothing to do with art.
I called it illustrations. But yeah, it's an interesting fact that in this hobby that it's even a discussion. I mean, I get it because there are some people who are who in their minds they would never be able to publish a board game unless they used generative illustrations, and
there's Creative Commons. There's
right.
Creative Commons. There's clip art. There's plenty of other things. You can draw a little stick figure.
Totally.
You or not use art at all. There's literally no excuse.
Right. And there's and to me it's a lack of awareness, and also a realization that something having polish in the way that there's this uncanny valley with AI generated images where it's overly polished and yet completely unbelievable at the same time. But a good personality and something original and perspective will trump that every time. And there are so many great stories of illustrations that you might initially look at as amateurish, but have evolved over time and really become something beautiful. I mean, even Red Raven Games, Ryan Lookout's original output was much more rough compared to where it is now.
Oh yeah.
But even then, it was charming. It had perspective. It evoked a tone that worked perfectly with those games. So yeah.
I'll give you a great example from the book. There's a game in there called Roll Camera by Keen Bean Studios, and it's got little stick figures all the way through it. Little stick figures making movies, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely adorable. It fits the playful tone the game wanted to have, and it's not oil paintings.
Right.
It's little stick figures. It's like SKCD sort of stuff. But it works.
Now, you are a game designer now. Red Dust Rebellion has come out, and you have another one in the works, or is it already?
Yeah, so Shadowmoon Syndicates went up for Kickstarter, and it's funded. Unfortunately, we went up during the US election, so we. I think our media buys got somehow a bit squashed.
Right.
So didn't do quite as well as we thought. We still got in about 150K. Did about 900 backers or something.
Right.
So that's coming out. It's been delayed a little just to sort out this whole tariff debacle. But it's good. I really like the game.
Did the
I think it's...
Do you think that the process of you becoming a game designer and much more involved in the meat and potatoes of getting these games into reality gave you a different perspective at all on what games that you would have selected for something like this? Like, did that give you any new insight into the industry that you might not have had before, considering you've been making these videos for ages and you've been a gamer for ages? It's this new transference into the role of published designer that I'm curious if that's kind of changed your perspective on games.
I think the hardest thing for me is, even with the book and especially with the channel, I am somewhat of what's the term? Polite way would be to say auteur. The other way would be to say brusque, demanding, one vision, no compromise kind of. I have an idea of what I want to do, and I do it. The difficult thing with creating board games is there are other people involved, and there are publishers. And for the most part, the editors of the book were like, "Yeah, no, cool, do what you want. We'll just can we change the language here and there?" I'm like, "Fine." But with making board games, you had to make a lot more compromises, and it's a lot more of a by committee process than a lot of people think it is. Like, as the designer, you're not a director. You don't get to make all the decisions and everyone just runs around and do what you say. You kind of more like the writer, where like you turn up with your stuff and they go, "Cool, now we're gonna make your game, and this is how your game is going to look, and this is how your game is going to feel." And yeah, for me that was quite hard in places.
You are telling me that you're the Stanley Kubrick of the board game world, then. Like, you need your vision to come to life, and sometimes the studio's over here going like, "Stanley, we can't fund this."
Yeah, pretty much. Like, yeah, especially like 3-minute board games. That's why I think I spend like 12 hours making work hours making a 3-minute video. Like, it's just the sort of level of finessing and direct vision that you don't see many other places.
Right.
Like, and I'm a little bit like that with my games as well. I have like this is the way it is, because this is, if we don't do it this way, then it's not the way it's done. And yeah, it can be tricky. Now,
since the last time we talked, you have a daughter, and that's awesome. Congratulations. You have a 4-year-old. Is that your only child?
Yeah. So Anne's our only child, and that's one of the really good things about the game design of the YouTube is I've just stopped working. I look after her. That is my job.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
So and looking after her. Steph still has to go to the office, so spare a thought for her. She has to be the breadwinner. But the channel, while it doesn't bring in gold-plated toilet money, it's certainly better than a lot of people's situations where they, if someone wants to stay at home,
right,
then you don't have any money coming in. So you have to both go to work and then pay for childcare, and then you're seeing your kid 2 hours a day.
Right. Yeah.
And we just didn't want that life.
It's not great. Going through some of the childcare situation myself when my son was younger, it's tough. And congratulations on it. And also, shout out for the sacrifices made so that you guys can arrange that. But has parenthood changed your perspective at all on games? I know that was a whole journey in and of itself with me when my son was born and starting to dip my toes into the whole world of HABA games, or starting to see games in a different light in what I can translate to my kid, what I want to share with them, even at a young age, like 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different in our situation here because like myself, Anne is autistic.
Okay.
But unlike me, I was a precocious talker. Anne is very much at the stage at the moment where she'll talk a lot, but she won't necessarily talk to you.
Sure.
There's a lot of internal stuff happening. So we're not quite at the stage where we're sitting down and playing games together. and might not be for quite a while, because there's a lot happening up here. Like, there is just so much happening.
Right.
It's just, she's more interested in her inner life at the moment than she is in necessarily the outer world.
Hey, like it's fortunate that you have that insight and perspective. I mean, in my day-to-day life, I work in social services. I work with a lot of kids with different neurological needs or like conditions, and so like being able to navigate that and have that understanding, and also the understanding between your own childhood and how you channeled that versus her.
Well, one of the sort of foundation things for me, being an autistic kid growing up, well, they didn't know what it was back then, but my parents definitely got me checked out for a whole bunch of things, and they kind of came back with he's something. We don't know what it is, but he's something. I didn't necessarily make a lot of friends particularly easily. What I would do is I would do my thing.
Right.
And my thing might be playing a board game. And I would play it by myself. And then people would see that I was busy and occupied and doing something.
Right.
And they would gravitate towards what I was doing and join in. And that's basically been my entire life. I do almost all my gaming in my own gaming space, and people come to me.
Right.
I kind of put down a flagpole saying, fun here, and people turn up. And I see Anne doing the same thing. She'll be just like, blocks. She'll be intensely playing with blocks, and you see the other kids just sort of turn up and be like, oh, are we building something? And join in, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I remember this.
That's so fascinating. And that's also, like, without trying to be like a armchair psychologist or anything, like the kind of deliberate, matter-of-fact nature of 3-minute board games makes a little bit more sense. That's a piece of a puzzle there, but it's also this kind of like, I guess, you're not just reviewing games, you're not just speaking to games, but it's also like you're collecting a 3-minute perspective on games. Like you are speaking to each of these in a very regimented and authoritative manner that makes a lot of sense. And now you're doing it again with this. You're doing it again with this book.
Yeah, so very few people when I mention this, they're like, oh yeah, no, we wouldn't have picked that. Everyone's like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. The guy who's like really particular about his board games and organized and structures everything turns out to be on the spectrum. What a shock.
So one more question specifically about the games that you included. Now that I know that you have this burning love for Terraforming Mars, and you did not include Terraforming Mars in here, is Earth a consolation prize in this book? I like Earth. Earth is on my shelf over there. But I notice a lot of people, like, Earth was popular when it first came out, and I almost feel like the board gaming space has turned on Earth. It's interesting that it wasn't in there, or that it isn't, in the same discussions as a lot of other games. And then I see it in the book, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, Earth got a spot in here. Okay.
And a little bit it's in there because Terraforming Mars isn't.
Right.
Like, Terraforming Mars could easily take that spot if it looked better. I prefer Terraforming Mars to Earth. But Earth's a chaotic mess. And I kind of like it for that.
Yeah.
It's not a keeper game for me. Like, I've passed on my copy. But it's a game that if someone sets it up, I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I'll be in for that.
Right.
But I'd much rather play Terraforming Mars or It's a Wonderful World than I would Earth. But there was originally a section almost entirely on games around the natural world. Like, when I first did the list, there were, and I think that chapter stayed around as like a chapter on science and nature.
Right.
And that's why Earth's in there, because I thought that was quite a cool sort of collection of games to pull together, a whole bunch of games around the natural world, because it's a cool thing to look at. So yeah, Earth's probably in, if we were going to rank these in like the first 10 games to the last 10 games, it's probably one of the last 10 games to go in.
Okay.
But I don't disagree with it being in there 6 months later. I think it's still a good game. It's an interesting game, and I think the theme and ideas in it will really appeal to people just because it's so chaotic.
Now, you don't strike me as someone who relies much on being cool. Like, you are cool, but part of that is that it does not seem like you're trying to be cool. That said, was there any trepidation in making this book, which very clearly seems to be for the general audience as opposed to the hardcore gamer, that you were worried that there would be fans of your channel that would pick up this book and then go like, wait a second, this is all somewhat superficial stuff, like this isn't a tearful story of why you love King of Tokyo. It's not about Richard Garfield's, transformation from being a PhD professor to being the founder of Magic the Gathering. You have some references to that kind of stuff, but for the most part, again, the target market for this book, while I found it entertaining and I found it interesting, functionally, the person who's actually going to get the most out of this is going to be the person who knows the least about your channel.
Yep. And that's all deliberate. I have a sort of theory I kick around that 95% of board game content is made for 5% of board gamers.
Right, yeah.
And the other 95% of board gamers are out there, they're browsing Barnes & Noble, they're picking up stuff from their local bookstore. They own 5 to 10 games, and they like those games, and they play them a lot.
Right.
The 5% are the people who've got like 100 games, who do like 3 gaming events a week. That's not normal. Like, I see people who have like 4 times as many games as I do, and they play practically every day, and I'm like, man, this is my job.
Right.
I mean, I love board games, but it's also my job. Your opinion when talking about what you think normal is, you are so far from normal that you're in the next county, which is why I like talking to my local post shop owner. So in New Zealand, we have these things called post shops. So they're NZ Post. They're part of the postal service. They also tend to have a Kiwi bank in it, which is a little banking place. And they tend to be a bookstore and a gift store, everything all sort of rolled into one.
I love it.
And they have this little shelf that has board games on it. And they've got maybe 30 games in there, including a copy of Red Dust Rebellion and a picture of me standing with the shop owner, shaking his hand with the copies of Red Dust Rebellion, because I live in a village. And I like to talk to them about what sort of games people are picking up, because the people who pop into that shop and go, ooh, this Wingspan game looks pretty cool, or ooh, I want to try this Floating Floors game about ninjas. They're not on Board Game Geek.
Right.
They're not watching the Dice Tower. They might occasionally watch Shut Up and Sit Down, because they're kind of almost good for entertainment. But they're certainly not watching 3-minute board games, and they're not listening to board game podcasts.
Right. Absolutely.
They're just out there living their lives. Board gaming is like a tiny part of their life, and a tiny part of their identity. And the book, and a large part, is written for those people. It's not written for the super users, because there's just so much content made for them. There's a surplus of content made for the 5%, where, as I say, 95% of board game content is made for 5% of the audience. I decided to make a bit of content that's more suited to the other 95%.
And what are the aims of this book? Like, what sort of deals? Like, I guess, how much involved are you in the publisher getting it into bookstores? Like, is it going to be available primarily online? Is it going to be available at Barnes and Noble? Like, what do you know about the ambitions for how wide-reaching this is going to be?
So Page Street is a sub-brand of Macmillan, and Macmillan is one of the big five
global
powerhouses of publishing. So the plan is, as far as I'm aware, it's going to be in every bookstore, everywhere in the damn world, physical copies, and I think they're translating it into multiple different languages. It is going to be shipping all around the world. It's just going to be everywhere. It's already in Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon. It's in pretty much every bookstore you can think of in the US already. And when it gets to New Zealand over here, it's going to be in Paper Plus and Whitcoulls. It's already on pre-order on Mighty Ape and the Nile. These guys are pros. Like,
they're legit.
They sent out, like, when I talked about review copies for the thing, they got me to put together a list. They'd also put together a list of 30 reviewers, and I got a few more. But then they sent a copy to every single publisher whose game is in the book. So that's something like
awesome.
65 or 70 publishers.
Yeah.
They sent a copy to. So I've already had Patrick Leder post, because he's got 2 games in the book, Root and Arcs. And James Hudson posted on his Instagram and Facebook for Druid City Games, because Wonderland War is in there. So yeah, they've sent them out to everyone. Like, so that's probably 100 review copies.
Yeah.
That have been sent out, and board games do not. No one sends out 100 review copies of a board game.
Of course. I mean, we're such a small industry compared to like the book industry, and just the, I guess, mechanics of getting books out into hands, making sure that even influencers, BookTube, making sure that people get their hands on these things. It's a whole much more mature and thought through beast than board games.
Like, I felt the whole way along that the process, it was really tight time frames too. And they were just there and checked it all the time, and we just boom, boom, boom. Every milestone was just getting ticked off. The whole thing felt like it was a Trello board, and we were just moving from gate to gate to gate and doing the required work. Like, they were so professional, and so they valued my time.
That's a
there's
gift.
A level of professionalism in book publishing that I don't want this to sound mean, but board game publishing is much more of a cottage industry than this.
Totally.
And that's not, I'm not intending to disrespect anyone in saying that, but you don't put enough things through the pipeline to get to that level of well-oiled. I mean, GMT does. GMT's actually pretty good, but it's such a very different experience. Plus, the huge difference is advances.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get advances in board gaming.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, maybe if you're Elizabeth Hargrave, maybe off of Wingspan or something, maybe she gets some.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think this is fabulous. I think it's a book that surprised me, and it definitely had that effect of me going, well, I don't know that this is necessarily a book that is going to make me consider more board games, but it definitely made me interested in the process of coming out with this book. And initially I was going to do like a review, and then I realized, like, you know what, I'd rather talk to you about like what this represented and how you approach this, and where you went with these games, some of the decisions that were included. Loved seeing Yokohama in here as well, which was
great game.
It was actually the game that started the discussion of beige Euro with a friend, because even though Yokohama is colorful, it's vibrant, it's eye-catching on the table,
and it's designed by a Japanese person in Japan about Japan, so it's very not Euro.
Yes, that's very true. But we were talking about how it has a very... from a certain perspective, it would be viewed as kind of a cold, abstract game, and that prompted me to be like, but that's okay, because beige Euro is my favorite genre game. But where do you go from here? Like, do you have the bug to write more books? Like, are there other things that when writing this you were like, I could take this a different direction. I really want to focus on this direction that I have here, but this does get the wheels spinning on what else you could do as an author.
I haven't actually thought of that. Like, I'm certainly not have any mind to do any fiction or anything. I mean, non-fiction's kind of my jam.
Well, I think there's room for 101 board games that changed my life. And you, my friend, have been playing games since you were a kid, right? Your own kid's age.
Yeah.
Like these things have shaped us in ways. My mom passed away at a very young age, or my young age, which was also terribly young for her. But one of my few memories with her was sitting on her lap while she was playing Scotland Yard with her. With my older brother. I had no idea how to play. I just knew there was like this Mr. X guy, and she let me move around the bus tokens or whatever. I was probably like 4 years old or something. But these things shape our lives, change our perspective, and while I think this is a great entry point for a lot of people, I do think that you have a knack for, again, getting to the essence of these games, and I think there's room for these shorter essays to collect and curate games in different ways that I think people would want to hear. They'd want to read it.
Well, I think there's a video I did at the start of the year. So Board Game Geek and the Dice Tower have their Board Game Halls of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
And they put in a whole bunch of games into these Hall of Fames. And so I sat down and I looked at the list, and it was just something just bugged me, no end about them. And I was thinking, am I just being a classical elitist geek and going, actually, I think this game should be in there, and you've put this one there. I'm like, no, I'm not this time.
Mm-hmm.
You've put games in your Hall of Fame.
Right.
You haven't put people in your Hall of Fame. And once I noticed that, it made me actually quite annoyed.
Yeah.
Because putting in June, that doesn't really say anything. It's a product.
Yeah.
And it's a Hall of Fame about products or people. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has bands in it. It doesn't have specific songs. People talk about the Oscars and like, oh yeah, but the Oscars put in a product. I'm like, no, that's their end of year award show.
Mm-hmm.
Their Hall of Fame is their Lifetime Achievement Award,
right.
And that is always people. And so if there was going to be another book I would consider doing, it might be putting together a Hall of Fame, or a sort of the people who changed board gaming. Not necessarily the games who changed board gaming, but the people who moved the dial. So when I did that list, I not only included designers, like the obvious ones,
right,
but I also talked about people like Christian T. Peterson for starting Fantasy Flight Games,
right,
Scott Alden for getting Board Game Geek going, artists like
right. You definitely talked about Ian O'Toole, Vincent Dutrait. You speak to artists in here, Kyle Farron. You make sure to mention a lot of people in these little posts, and the things that draw your attention is kind of the human element, the person behind the game and what they are trying to convey through the game, which in a way brings it back to that kind of auteur perspective that you were talking about earlier. Is when you were going into designing a game, maybe you thought about it less as a product and more as a conversation between you, the person making the game, and the experience that you wanted to provide for the person who is playing it at the table.
Absolutely. That is absolutely how I think about games. Like, I'm a. It's easy to make a board game product. Just find a popular IP, get some mechanics, throw some crappy art on it, make Marvel Pandemic, whatever. Easy peasy, go print money.
Yeah.
It's not. If you actually just want a board game to make money, then just put some schlop on it. Make a deck building game about Harry Potter. Harry Potter deck building game. Cool. Oh, there's already one of those.
Right.
Anyway, that will print money. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if the game's good. And in fact, that game is not good.
Right.
They didn't bother testing it, and by the time you get to the fifth act, it falls to pieces. But it sold a bucket load of copies because it's a product.
Right.
Funko Pop, that's a product. For me, a board game's something more than that. It's something. Well, it's more interesting than that. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. And I've wrestled a lot with are board games art or our games are games craft, and how meaningful of a distinction there is between art and craft. But I have
a great analogy for the board game art thing.
Sure.
People try to compare board games to music or movies or whatever. Mm-hmm. What board games are is sheet music.
Yeah.
So when you put out a piece of music as sheet music, every time it is played, it is interpreted by the performers. So if you give the same sheet music to Radiohead that you give to Slayer, you are going to hear a different performance every time, or different groups will interpret it differently.
God, I want to see this YouTube channel where Radiohead and Slayer are coming in and both playing, some sheet music.
Yeah, playing the same thing. And what we have with a board game is you have something like a piece of sheet music that's put down and it is interpreted and reperformed every time it is done.
Right.
But it's not linear like a sheet of music, so you're reinterpreting it back and forth and ending up with a different composition. And this is why I think people can play the same game and go, this is crap, this is great, when they've really what's happened is you've had a good experience with the same game and you've had a poor experience with the same game, and perhaps if you were playing in that game, you'd also think it was great.
Right.
Because of how we reinterpret it.
So, yeah. I could record a whole 3-hour podcast just on philosophizing about the nature of art, and I think this isn't everyone's definition, but the definition that I have come to is just, art is something that has to be created and that there is some intent on communication. There is some intent of communication between what I made and whoever is going to be viewing that. And if there isn't intent, then it's not art. You might not even know exactly what you intend to communicate, but it is an attempt to communicate through the medium in which you're producing art. And that's why a piece of furniture could be a craft and be very beautiful, and it is not art, but very beautiful. I'm not trying to dismiss it, but another piece of furniture that is made with the intent of conveying something, I would say is art. And those two things could look very similar, but in a very complex, crazy, wild world, in which we could get pedantic about this kind of stuff endlessly. That's what I had to settle on. The last thing that I wanted to bring up is just getting back to the design world. So you got one game out, you got one game in the pipe. What's next on the horizon for Jarrod as the board game designer?
So it's been pretty tricky just with Anne, because I really only get 3 mornings a week without her, and evenings to do. Most of that's doing the channel, so I haven't done a huge amount. I'm halfway through designing an expansion for Red Dust Rebellion.
Oh man,
that's probably the next thing, and then I have 6 or 7 really freaking good ideas pinned up on a board, and I just need to pick one and do it. And I am tempted to take those ideas and do a full, on the channel, transparent creative process.
That would be
get
amazing.
People involved and go, because I don't think anyone's done that to a sufficient sort of quality before. I know there's a couple of little channels that have done something similar to that, where they're like trying to get their first Kickstarter, so they go through the whole process. But the people doing that normally haven't designed a game before, and they certainly don't have, a big base. And I think it'd be quite cool to do that and try to build up sort of following or interest or buy-in for a game, because people have been involved in the creative process, and then try to then market the game and see what happens. It's like, oh, by the way, we've designed a game. Here's a whole bunch of information about it and a ready-made audience.
Right, exactly.
And I think that'd be really interesting, as not only creating the product in the end, but as an artistic endeavor, as something that people can buy into and get involved with, and also as a creator having this sea of potential voices and ideas.
The feedback
to bounce off could be fascinating.
Yeah, it's like making a documentary as you're making a film or something. It's going deep into the process, so you have the feedback from the audience, but then you can also reflect on it. And I know I'm the type of person who loves I started the Cardboard Herald initially to talk to people like you, making games or, making conventions, or I was much more interested in, like, what is the human element of bringing these things into the world, or what drove you to do these things. And I've been that with everything. I'm the type of person who wants to read every liner note on Pearl Jam's verses and, figure out exactly what's going on in there, and then learn about, like, oh, well, where did Eddie Vedder grow up? And, start figuring out, well, who was his favorite bands when he was growing up, and then learn about them. Like, I love the stories behind the people or behind the things that I consume and that I love and that I interact with. And I think that would be an amazing gift to the just creative board game community, to kind of expose your process there. And an avenue for your channel. Come on, man. You got to get that monetization.
Well, it's also it's something no one else is doing. And I think it's one of the things, if you're making content and you're making content everyone else is making, then you're probably making the wrong content.
Right. I hear that. Well, man, I am thrilled that I got a copy of the book. For everyone in the audience, 101 board games to try before you die of boredom. Not named by Jay, but written by Jay. This is definitely, like, going to be a great stocking stuffer, Christmas gift, or the people that I thought of first that I was going to hand this book off to after my wife and I finished reading it was actually some of the gamers that I'm meeting at my public game night here in Juneau that doesn't happen at a game shop. It happens at Devil's Club Brewery, and there are a lot of people who go there that are exactly who you talked about. The people who own 5 games, 10 games, who every time I bring some tried and true games, they're like, oh, I've never heard of that before. And they just love, one time someone introduced to them Junk Drawer, this little, game by a small publisher in Washington, D.C., and they just fell in love with it. So they bought 2 copies and then copies for all their adult kids to play with their grandkids. And they're like, well, I heard there's a board game night at Devil's Club. I'll go there on Mondays. You know who gets this? Vicky. Vicky is getting a copy of this because she would love just going, oh my God, there's so many great games out there.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Thank you for coming onto the show. Thank you for this book, and thank you for just blazing trails and being an awesome voice in the board game community, Jay.
It's really humbling. I kind of think I'm a bit of a dick, but that's okay.
Well, you can be kind of a dick, but you can also be kind of a leader while being a dick at the same time.
Terrifying. All right. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yep.